Hi, I'm Jan. We're going to read Stanley, the Australian Boomerang Bonanza. Chapter 1, The Grand Prize. Snow whipped through the air in thick blankets. Stanley Lamchop trudged on, trying not to flap in the wind. Overhead, Stanley could just make out his younger brother Arthur. "Keep going," Arthur's voice called. "We're almost there." Since the morning, Stanley Lamchop had awakened to discover that he had been flattened by a bulletin board over his bed. He had traveled far and wide. He had trekked through the Mexican jungle. He had crossed the African savanna. He had braved the Canadian Arctic. But this just might be his most difficult journey of all. "And it's only the walk home from school," thought Stanley. He tried to take another step, but the wind blew him off his feet yet again. He flew backwards into the side of the bus shelter with a slap. Stanley groaned. Since being flattened, Stanley could do all sorts of useful things. He could travel by mail, slide under doors, and fly like a kite. But being half an inch thick also had its disadvantage. "It sure doesn't have one bit in a blizzard," Stanley thought. Arthur ran up. "Are you okay?" he cried over the howling wind. Stanley gritted his chattering teeth. "I hate this winter." Arthur nodded and held out his hand. "Hold on to me." Stanley grabbed his brother's outstretched mitten. Arthur leaned into the wind and battered down the sidewalk, dragging Stanley's body flat behind him like a cape. "I wish we lived somewhere hot," Stanley grumbled. "Tell me about it." Arthur called over his shoulder. "Can you believe that right now it's summer in Australia?" "We could be on a beach," said Stanley. "If only I won that kangaroo contest," said Arthur. Kangaroos was Arthur and Stanley's favorite breakfast cereal. Several months ago, Stanley had cut out from the back of their cereal box and entered a contest whose grand prize was a trip to Australia. Nothing ever happened, though. Arthur pulled Stanley up the front step of their home, pushing the door closed behind them. Stanley flattened himself against it and took a deep breath. A row of icicles fell from the side of his body. "Thank you, Arthur," he said. "I don't know how I made it without you." Arthur shrugged. "I don't know how you make it anywhere without me." He pulled off his boots. "After all, who was it that saved you on the Mount Rushmore? Who solved all your problems over the telephone when you're in China? Who got us down that river in Africa?" "You're the one who dropped the paddle," cried Stanley, suddenly dawned under the collar. "I did not," replied Arthur. "You dropped the paddle." "I did not," huffed Stanley. "Arthur, is that you?" their mother's voice called from the next room. Arthur held up his hand. "I'm just saying," he said in a low voice. "The next time you go somewhere, take me along. Will you?" Then he added, "especially if it's Hawaii or Florida." Stanley couldn't help it. He smiled. "You're here!" Mrs. Lamchop came bustling down the hall, her eyes fixed on Arthur. She seemed very excited. "Wait until the smile fell from her face. "Why, you look like a wet dog." Arthur chuckled. "I just walked through a blizzard. Their father, Judge Lambchop, appeared with their comb and started dragging its lovely Arthur's hair. Dad, protested Arthur. Mrs. Lambchop bit her lip, and his socks are all wet. Their parents didn't even seem to notice that Stanley's socks were wet too. What is going on? Arthur and Stanley both cried. There's someone important to see, Arthur, Mr. Lambchop said in a strange voice. He stepped back to examine his handiwork and then wrinkled her nose. Just say you haven't had a chance to wash up, he whispered, then led the boys into the living room. A bare-chested man wearing a leather-white-brimmed hat was standing in the middle of the room. An officer-looking young woman holding a clipboard stood beside him. Arthur stopped in his tracks. But you're, he sputtered. Stanley stared at the man. He did look very familiar. Good day, Arthur, said the man in an accent that sounded British. Do you have something to say to me? Arthur looked at him blankly. I haven't had a chance to wash up, he blurted. The man's thick eyebrows danced up and down with amusement. Then, very mysteriously, he said, Isn't there something else you should say, mate? Arthur gulped. He opened and shut his eyes. He swallowed. He pinched Stanley. Ouch! Stanley cried. I'm not dreaming, Arthur croaked under his breath. Then, in a very loud, careful voice, he began, I just... Suddenly, Stanley knew exactly who the man was. Jump for kangaroos! He and his brother shouted together, hopping up and down in time with the words, just like in a kangaroo's comicals. For the man standing before them was none other than Billy Wobbly, the Australian cereal magnate whose face graced the front of every box. This could mean only one thing. Looked like Arthur and a guest are coming with me to Australia, Billy Wobbly announced. The living room went wild. The woman with the clipboard clapped. Arthur did a crazy dance. Harriet Lambchop started to cry. Judge Lambchop shook everybody's hand. Mr. Wallaby himself slapped Stanley on his back so hard that Stanley flipped over. I can't believe it, said Arthur. I never thought when I cut out that form from the back of the cereal box. Never say never, mate, said Mr. Wallaby. So, who are you going to take with you? Your mom or your dad? Stanley looked at the ground. He understood, of course. He had gone so many trips without Arthur. It was only fair that Arthur got to have his own adventure for once. And then Arthur did something that surprised Stanley even more than an Australian billionaire showing up in their living room and giving away a trip to the other side of the world. He said, Can Stanley come? Chapter 2. The Aussie Crew. It had not been easy for Arthur to convince Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop to allow him and Stanley to travel to the other side of the globe without them. But the rules of the contest stated clearly that only 2 people could go, and Mr. Wallaby and his assistant, Mrs. Peart, both promised that the boys would be carefully looked after. Now, the Lambchop family stood on the tarmac in front of a small private jet, saying their goodbyes as snow fell lightly around them. Mrs. Lambchop hugged Stanley and Arthur tightly. Finally, Stanley whimpered, Mom, you're going to wrinkle me. Of course, she said, letting them go and forcing a brave smile onto her face. You know, there is a great deal of unusual slang in Australia, such as rhyming slang, where a rhyming word is used to signify other word. For instance, dog and bone means telephone, and place and of means feet. Is that fascinating? Did you know, Mom? Arthur groaned. We'll be fine, Mom, Stanley said more gently. He knew his mother was just rambling about the English language to make herself feel better. After all, it was her favorite subject. Mr. Lambchop put a comforting arm around his wife. Stanley, he said, we are the most experienced traveler than your younger brother. We accept you to stay with him at all times. Stanley started. Arthur, said Mr. Lambchop, keep the flat kid out of trouble. Arthur cracked a smile. Mr. Lambchop said nothing for a moment, and then he stepped forward and put his gloved hand on the boy's shoulders. Stanley could feel it resting on the edge of the body near his cheek like a warm blanket. Do you solemnly promise that you will take care of each other no matter what? We promise, interned Arthur and Stanley. Behind them, Mrs. Pert had stepped out on the top of the metal staircase that connected the plane to the tarmac. Time to go, said Arthur, and before their parents could say another word, he grabbed Stanley's hand and sprinted for the plane. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad, called Stanley, his body once again flapping in the air behind his brother. Wow, said Arthur, bouncing up and down. Let us sit. Arthur, Stanley, I'd like to introduce you to a few people, said Miss Pert, an unshaven man wearing a t-shirt and hiking boots ambered into the Arthur. This is Mr. Billabong, Mr. Wobbly Butler. You don't look like a butler, said Stanley. Mr. Billabong grinned. Yeah, well, you don't look like a person, but you're, aren't ya? Call me Bungo. And this, continued Mrs. Pert, is our chef, Sheila. She was an uncouth-looking woman with curly red hair. How you do, boys? Hope you like Batmite. What Batmite? Asked Arthur. I was hoping you'd say that, cried Shala, producing a plate from behind her back with 2 pieces of toast spread with a thin layer of a dark brown jam. Try some. Arthur and Stanley each took a piece of toast. Exchanging looks, they took a bite. Stanley stopped chewing at once. It tastes like beef stew with all stalks. Isn't it, Ace? Said Sheila excitedly. That means great, whispered Miss Pert. Oh yes, whispered Miss Pert. Oh yes, said Arthur, his eyes watering as he forced himself to swallow. May we please have some water, Stanley crowed. 2 waters coming right up, Bungo said, ready to see the pilot, Miss Pert asked. She led them to the front of the plane and opened the door to the cockpit. The pilot turned to greet them, and Stanley and Arthur gasped. It was Mr. Wallaby himself. Take a seat, co-pilot. The billionaire said, his eyebrows dancing. Let's get this boomerang in the air. Thank you for listening, and next time we will read Chapter 3, Getting Down Under. Bye!